first one that several of you wrote down was he who defines ultimately controls. And if you recall, the first time I brought this up, the way I used it, of using as a springboard that which would apparently be an external world, the external state, is think about the absolute monarch. If you have got an official state reality, sometimes crudely referred to as propaganda, but propaganda now has a very low rent connotation to it, because when you have a real monarchy, official reality rises far above the sense that people normally now say propaganda and sort of sneer, or else say it in a frightening way, like it's a pack of lies. If it's official reality, it is not a pack of lies. And it fits in exactly to what I put in that first way that I presented it, that he who defines ultimately controls. The specific use of that, if you can find it, is of course, as always, is within. If you intellectually realize that in the ordinary sense, in a quite routine, uncontrollable sense, as even people before me out in the city, ordinary people, have had this idea and tried to express that whatever you think is real is what's real. And I'm sure that made a philosophy paragraph in some textbook somewhere, and it's been repeated many times and people just hear it, and you can't really argue with it. But as everything else in the city, it has no real permanent pertinency. It does not affect anything over any long range in one person's lifetime. But once you see that there is absolute validity out there, if you got to look out there, which is fine, first, but then internally, it is true, it's of no great consequence, but it is true with ordinary people, with your old intelligence, that your definition of reality is your controlling mechanism. It is, of course, life operating through you, but it's life operating and controlling some little area, your life, in the ways in which your life transforms, transmits energies. It is making what seems to be your reality, including yourself, your sense of who you are. But if you can see precisely how this is operating, then you could, in a new level, at a new level, operate as a newly positioned monarch. That you decide what is reality. And you do it by defining. But if you use the definitions that are already extant in you, nothing will ever change. You've got the same reality. You can argue with it, as you've always done. You can even apparently criticize it. You can even apparently, if you've already done this, you can certainly do it again. Because in the city, that's one of the great things to keep you alive in the city, is if you've done it once, you can do it again. That keeps many people from suicide, I'm sure. But you've got to see that there is a possibility that you can redefine. But if you're going to redefine it, it has got to be outside the ordinary confines of two-dimensional thinking. Or else all you would do is try to turn it upside down. You would simply try and do something at the ordinary level that would be silly, which is not the point, but it would be unprofitable. You have to operate in such a way that it would be a real parallel to an external monarch. Remember, monarch is a sole, a single authority somewhere, a single source, answerable to no one, no parliament, no discussion, no dialogue. Not my kind of monarch, not even the kind of monarch that the dictionary denotes. It is absolute exercise of power. Discusses it with no one. Now, if you had that kind of internal source of authority, that you had in some way either short-circuited, transformed, transcended the dialogue, you could establish what was your own state's reality, official reality. And to your own people, they could go, wait a minute, This was not reality yesterday. This is not reality to all the other people we know out here. But if you have got a real monarch, it's surprising, in case you hadn't realized it. It's surprising how people can accommodate themselves, and will do so, to a real monarch. People are not inclined to stand up and say, well, you just calling up, down is not going to make up down. Now, one person, of course, may do that here and there, and the monarch says, shoot him. And then he says, does anybody else so deranged that you do not see that up is down? And that's about all it takes. Is then everyone else goes, surprisingly, now that you mention it, some of us are about to come to that same conclusion. Let me tie in, somebody else wrote down this one. And I'm paraphrasing, I didn't go back, because all of you didn't remember exactly how the Chi roots went that we were reading. But the paraphrase was this, that an absolute monarch, or only an absolute monarch, could absolutely guarantee absolute freedom. I am paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. Of course, only for himself. Now, there's been a variation I read somewhere in my lifetime that some ordinary historian, politician, general somewhere during the history of humans made some comment similar to the fact that only absolute freedom could be guaranteed by an absolute monarch. Now, let me stop just a minute, because I didn't comment on this when I let him first state it. Let's start externally for just a second. It may strike your intelligence at first that that's not true. You're wrong. It would only be an absolute monarch. Now forget the 3D dual thinking possibility of this being improbable at the least. But it would only be an absolute monarch who could absolutely guarantee freedom. Now, if you're dealing with a dialogue, if you're dealing with a dual throne, if you're dealing with a parliament, if you're dealing with various voices having some input into what seems to be the source of authority, there is no absolute guarantee of freedom. You got to understand, of course, there's no absolute guarantee of anything. If you're going to leave it to a Congress or a parliament, if you're going to leave it even to a dialogue, if you've got two kings, if you've got shared power, there is no absolute guarantee of anything. But let's go back to freedom, because it sounds very striking at first. That only an absolute monarch, or if I can help the two-dimensional ironic sound of it, only an absolute tyrant could absolutely guarantee freedom. Because he's the only guy that can absolutely, that's the only form of authority, the only source of authority that can absolutely guarantee anything. Like he can say, absolutely, I guarantee tomorrow I'm going to kill half the population. Now, if the parliament says that, or if it's a dual dictatorship, you figure, well, there's some chance tonight that one of them will get drunk, or the guy that said that, the other, his partner, will talk him out of it, or he'll forget about it. But if the one guy says it, that's the closest you can get to having any assurance of something absolutely happened. So even though it sounds like a contradiction in itself, only an absolute monarch could absolutely guarantee absolute freedom. Now, internally, do you see that you could use that in the sense that you need to consolidate, to say the very least, the dialogue? The very noise that passes for being you, the very noise that everybody else takes as being themselves, the very noise that everybody else takes as being themselves, and when they look out upon others, if they ever have the occasion to look upon other people and think for a second, I wonder what he's really thinking. I wonder what she really has in mind for me. The sensation is, the unanalyzed sensation, is that there's the same kind of noise, the same kind of dialogue, perhaps with different words, different attitudes, but there is that dialogue going on in everybody else. How do you expect to guarantee anything to yourself? How could you expect that you can make any decision if the dialogue is going on? Now, if you had any real knowledge of the human nervous system. Crudely put, if you actually knew what you had done up until now on these years on Earth, then you'd realize, hell, I can't guarantee anything. I don't mean just say that. You would absolutely understand, I can't guarantee anything. That seeing it from a more clinical view, it is almost a miracle that I can go in each night and see my wife, my husband, 3 times a year to go see my mother and not kill them. Or to pull up to the service station and look up and gas has gone up 2 cents a gallon and me not to jump out with my pistol and shoot the whole place. For me, just get out of my car and look at it and pour gasoline on my hair and set myself on fire and scream and fall down and kick and do who knows what. Because I certainly, based upon my past, based upon what I am up to this point, I cannot guarantee absolutely anything. It just seems relatively safe that you plod along at the ordinary level day after day and you seem to retain something resembling a continuity of thought. But if any of you think that that is very important, notice this. You're inclined, once you hit about the age of 25 or so, you're inclined to stay the same weight, if not more so. So to say that you're inclined to take the habits that you seem to have and keep them. Fatten them up a little bit. If you're sort of a teenage pisser when you're a teenager, then when you're middle age, you're a terror. You get to be 60 and nobody can stand you. So there is that sensation of continuity. And so people in the city, if they heard me talking about this, they might say, well, you can guarantee more or less that a person in the city, they'd probably say, notwithstanding some unforeseen change in their circumstance and the environment, but if they have a fairly sane and routine environment, then we can expect that whatever someone is when they're 21, they're going to more or less be that way. We can almost guarantee it. And if you look out in the city, they're right. I'll put it to you another way, if I'm making this too occult, not in a mystical sense, too obtuse. Let's look at it this way. I'll put it to you another way, that once you see it, it is sort of a miracle. Even if you've got a nervous system that decries the oft-times deranged, perverse, unexpected, criminal, immoral behavior of society in general. Yeah. It is almost a miracle, looked at another way, that you can indeed pull up to the service station and get out and turn on the knob and somebody in there turns it on and somebody else waiting lets you finish yours, somebody pulls in, doesn't hit you, doesn't knock you out. If you go in the store and say, could I have a loaf of bread? It's a small miracle that the person goes, loaf of bread! And they pull out a gun and shoot you. Or they scream, and I can't stand it if one more person asks for a loaf of bread. In a sense, all of that is miraculous. Don't worry about flying saucers and all that. It is almost miraculous once you see it, that at the ordinary level, you can get through 65 years without being chopped up by a mad killer, without being surrounded by people that if you just say something like, have a nice day, and they go, have a nice day! But if you go in and you walk in to see your mother for Thanksgiving, you go in and she says, yes, who are you? You say, it's me, your son. And she says, I don't have a son. And you say, yes, I do. And she says, oh, I knew it, but I just don't like you. Ah! You know. But what seems to be a kind of relatively stable and predictable life in the city, I could present to you another way. It is life around the corner. It is the 4 and the 5D world operating at its own pace for its own benefit, manifesting itself through human behavior. And it has already established a kind of monarch that you cannot see. The stability, the apparent stability, is coming from directions. It is coming from additional complex dimensions that cannot be seen. And that's why I say, whether it made that much sense besides making you laugh, that it is sort of miraculous that you can get through 65 or 70 years without just strange things happening. Not just being murdered, because we say if you got murdered, then you're murdered and nothing else to say, but without somebody kidnapping you and holding you for 14 days in a Kenmore dryer. You know, just something, or your mother denying that you're her son or daughter. Just just insane things that you would think is some kind of science fiction or Twilight Zone. The reason it makes those interesting, if you want to take a sidestep, why do people like not only science fiction but all kinds of spooky fiction, the Twilight Zone? Unexpected things happen. People turn the corner, go into their old house, and they walk in, and there's a brand new wife and family and everybody, and they treat him, the husband, let's say, like he's it. But as far as he's concerned, this is not my family, that kind of thing. Why do people like it? I'll tell you why they like it. They don't know why. I'm sure somebody's tried to analyze it, more than one person back in the city, but I'll tell you why they like it. It's just why I told you. That it's a miracle this doesn't happen all the time. And it's, I guess they'd call kind of a cathartic laugh, that, oh, to be able to look at on TV and laugh, because people got a sensation that it is almost a miracle that I go home and I pull up and my house is where I left it. They never think about it this way. And it looks like it did. I got my same dog in the yard. There's my other station wagon. It's still there. And they go in and they look. They walk in the house and they holler, "It's me, dear." And the deer that comes out is the same woman. And the little children go up and say, "Hello, Daddy." People got a sensation because they can see a movie or a TV show when the guy goes up home, and that doesn't happen. Well, I started to ask you, why do people like that? Besides trying to analyze it psychologically, when it would appear to be silly. Why would anybody even find it interesting to read a short story or a novel or to see a TV show that their ordinary life is just turned inside out, and they can't understand why? What makes that interesting? What does that prove? What does that tell you? How does that inspire you? How does that take you something new? What's entertaining about it? I don't have time to tack it all up and down the line. I'm just trying to get you to see that from one view you'd think, yeah, why is that entertaining? It's entertaining because it's almost a miracle, and people have a non-verbal suspicion of this, that things don't happen like that all the time. That the world is not run like a Salvador Dali one-reeler. That everything is not running into everything else and everything is changing, and you leave your family sitting at the table and you go to the bathroom and you come back and it's a whole new family. Or you go to the bathroom and you come back and you're standing and it's 1660 and there's Cromwell, and suddenly you're in England. That kind of thing. If you had a kind of absolute monarchy internally, you could be defining anew in ways I'm not really going to put into words for you, because it's not simply, I'm not trying to distract you from what I was pointing out a few days ago, that you can take certain methods, certain ways you look at things and reverse them as a starting point. This is not the same thing, but what I'm saying is, of redefining a reality is not simply saying that what is real right now is not real. You got to make it more complex. You got to take in another dimension, that you start to absolutely define reality, and compared to what the rest of you thinks, compared to what the dialogue thinks, you may be setting up a form of abject propaganda as far as it's concerned. That what I'm defining now as reality is not. Now, if that sounds too strange, let's take it this way. Instead of the dialogue worrying about anything that's been concerned about all of your life, I'm too shy. Oh, no, you're not. Well, yeah, I am. Well, perhaps there's a good reason for it. Maybe you are sort of inferior. Well, I don't think that. I read that nobody's really that inferior. There's probably something my family did. Well, yeah, you're right about that. Your father was not, Robert Young. Instead of that, and I told you I wasn't going to put it into words, and I hesitate, but instead of any possible ordinary two-dimensional, three-dimensional that is, but from the binary thought world, anything that could arise from that kind of discussion back and forth, forget any possibility there, go off somewhere else. That would be redefining, that would be the state's new reality. Kind of vague, isn't it? All right, let me put it to you this way. Some of you should be able to hear this. This kind of new reality would be defined by action, not talk. Does that help? No. A man decides to stop a hobby. A man decides he'll quit smoking. He doesn't tell anybody he quit. If anybody asks him, he won't admit he did. If they say, well, in that case you didn't, he won't admit that. Whatever it is he did it. That's new reality. That takes an absolute monarch. For a man to change, or somebody to say, you act differently. Would you like to hear what I think about the way you act differently? Well, I thought you would. You used to, I don't know what it was, you used to always be kind of shy. A lot of us, we liked you. I've always liked you. That didn't bother me. But have you been taking, I bet you got some of those subliminal tapes that you play at night that says, I'm not shy, I'm not shy. Or you know, how to get your point over and be pushy in 30 minutes, right? Wait, you started taking drugs. You started drinking again. All right, that could be an attempted conversation of dialogue going on between the person that apparently had changed and somebody else, or internally of his own dialogue trying to get him to say, have you quit smoking? Have you quit drinking? What's going on the way you just started walking into places and it doesn't seem, you're not listening anymore, you're not discussing with us about how shy you are and what could happen. I'm aware of it. I mean, you walked out of the car, you just stopped while I go in front of that restaurant. There's a bunch of single people hanging around. I saw you. You know, I'm in here with you. You just stopped and you got up and just walked in. What's going on? Are you mad at us? Have you been reading some kind of self-help book while we were asleep or out of town? It would be action, not words. That would be the definition of a new reality. That would be a defining manifestation, if you could follow it, of a new level monarch. If there was such an absolute monarch, if I got to go through this again, which I am about to, I guess, a real monarch, think about it. Who's he going to discuss things with? If you're a real monarch, I got news for you. Everybody else, read my lips, everybody else are piss ants. Oh, I know, they're the populace, and I'm sure there's some good folks, and blessed are the meek because God made so many of them, and they're humble. But if you're an absolute monarch, and you look out upon the people, all you see is X number, 2,000, 200,000. All you see is 200,000 dancing partners. And they'll dance backwards whenever you step up. Well, either that or get shot. And a real monarch, of course, doesn't think about threats. If you're a real monarch, you don't sit around thinking about, well, they'll do it, or by God, I'll know why. If I return to one of the subjects and I say, hey, come here, let's dance, or do something for me, and the guy goes, well, I'm kind of busy, Your Highness. Maybe I won't have him shot right then, but by God, I'll set up some kind of intricate rococo plot, and I'll get that bastard. What kind of monarch's that? Now, it may sound all right back in the 3D world of movies and fiction, but if you were an absolute monarch, you wouldn't even be thinking the possibility of retaliation of some kind, because you would not even be thinking the possibility of failure. It would not, at the ordinary level, I'm having to compare with ordinary thought, it would not cross your mind that you would turn to somebody in your state and say, or else by action show them, I want you to do so-and-so. A real monarch would never think that the person might go, well, it's kind of late. Or me? He would never think of it. There is the new reality. There is guaranteed freedom. Guaranteed. I can probably tie all these together before it's over, but here was another one. I'm going to paraphrase that too, I think. Of course, I say I think. I guess it's pretty certain I will, since I can't even remember absolutely how it went. But I know the gist of it because I thought of it. Me and Kyrute. It was this, that stupidity in the weak can be disturbing, if not annoying. But in the powerful, it is awesome. Now I guess I can take a second, if I need to, and set up the good springboard scenario of apparently out here. Talking about people out in the street, people working in 7-Eleven stores, the general populace of any state. To run across people here and there who seem to be less than even operating at 8 cylinders in the fast lane. That such as you ask, could you turn the gas pump? That kind of thing. You go in a 7-Eleven store, a market, and say, do you have bread? And they go, bread. That sort of thing. All right, that can be everything from, I said disturbing, such as people saying, my God, what's the world coming to? Illiterates everywhere. People need maps and directions to find their hands, to know. You could think that to it being annoying. Come on, turn on the gas, I'm in a hurry. It's that pump 5. Look at that button there behind you. Pump. It can be like that, all right? But it does not ever strike anyone, of course, that stupidity, simplistic thought, simplistic behavior in the weak, in the powerless, is not awesome. Because for one thing, they got no authority, but it just never strikes anybody. But for somebody in authority to have that kind of simplistic stupidity, but stupidity is a pretty ordinary term. If you can think about it, simplistic mental processes, simplistic wiring system in toto, for them to end up in a position of power, I said awesome, if you don't really catch I like that word. But I'll deal with some of you who may find that to be too obscure or too uncertain. Frightening! And it happens. It happens in the external world, that people get in positions of power. I mean, you've got these royal families throughout Europe, for instance, and inbreeding. Sooner or later, you've got a guy that ends up on the throne for a while that looks like Elmer Fudd. And one I never had Kyrute do, but sure a lot of you know it. People that look like Elmer Fudd think like Elmer Fudd. Life does not allow people in the city to like that. Which is why in the city they can't ever really come to the conclusion that, hey, genes are it. That's just not allowed yet in life. And so, out in life, that's not a fact. That sounds prejudicial. But now all of you should know. Somebody that looks stupid is stupid. Well, of course, you got to know. It can't just be at the ordinary level that you don't like somebody's looks, because you don't like somebody's looks all the time. Now all kinds of people don't like your looks. It's not that. That if you actually understand what I'm saying. Generally, it's simply genetics. But that was a little joke that I was pulling in to get this going, that kind of inbreeding is what it's blamed on, and I wasn't going into any attempted discussion along those kind of biological lines, but you can see photographs, you can see some of it living right now in certain parts of Europe of this inbreeding, and the people do not look all that sharp. Now they have the ability, they can stand up for hours at a time at attention, and they got all this jewelry, and they can look. There's a thing about the ambiance. I mean, you could take Elmer Fudd probably and put him in that kind of uniform, or put on all the Pope's clothes and put him up on that balcony, and you would still, if you didn't know better, you walked out there and you were a Catholic or wired up for that, you would probably feel a tremble. Unless you got real, real close and got binoculars and went, Doris, I think that's Elmer Fudd. All I'm saying is, genetically, just because somebody begins to look like a horse with a low IQ, and they're dressed up and they're a prince or a princess, that doesn't mean that they still cannot have that kind of charismatic, as they call it, effect on people, because it is genetic. But at times it comes out in ways that on the surface are negative and not positive. But as I was saying, it happens. You know, there are outstanding cases in history. I mean, they're always remembered that somebody apparently, they're just normally referred to as deranged, they inherit a throne. They end up in power, but they are simplistic as much as a guy on the corner, some cobbler, some guy that walks around talking to himself. But a guy living there on the street, or maybe he has a little job that he does repair shoes, and everybody knows, as long as they can remember, old Amos has been talking to himself. He does it all the time. He'll do it right in front of you, like he's talking to somebody. And nobody cares. But you find out the king died, and his brother, they drag him in. He's been over in France, or been out of town somewhere, and they bring him in. And you find out, I mean, he sits down on the throne, and he'll suddenly turn around and start talking to himself. Then he'll go back, yes. That is awesome. Frightening. Why? Think about it a second. Why? Well, a piece of it I was mentioning the other night. I was going to expand on it sometime, and I'll do a little expanding right this second. Growth is complex. Now, all of this, of course, has to be put, relatively speaking, in the three-dimensional world, but it's still valid, and it's easy to see once you get your little visual grips on it. Growth is complex. Regression, retreat, shrinkage is simplistic. Always. When you have someone that apparently is in a position and is going to exercise authority, power, dominance, and compare it even to those that they are going to dominate, compared to them, their thinking is simplistic. It may be called deranged, perverted, insane, but what it is simplistic. The people know if he dominates the way that the king should, somebody in that position dominates, we're going backwards. They know that down at the cellular level. They don't know it up here. They'll discuss all kinds of things. We got to throw over the king because he's crazy. He'll get us into wars. All you know. I'm telling you, at the cellular level, they know that we're supposed to dance backwards. They know as much as wolves know. We got one leader. We're supposed to go where he goes. So here he is, the brand new, the ran man put on the crown, the brand new wolf, the brand new head chimpanzee of the pack. And they found out that he is simplistic. At the cellular level, life knows, back to the human descriptions, the people know. Let me still say that a kind of the charismatic connection between the people, that they come out and there is a brand new king, brand new wolf, brand new chimpanzee, brand new tyrant, brand new monarch, and there he is, and they may just look at him. That's why I was making some of the jokes about the looks. Or he may have to talk to himself for a few minutes, but they are there prepared to dance backwards. They're prepared to be led as they're supposed to be. That some cellular body is supposed to be leading other groups of cellular bodies. They're ready for it, but then they understand, wait a minute. And I say understand, again, I repeat, at the cellular level. We're supposed to dance, we're prepared to dance, we want to dance backwards. We need leadership. This is simplistic leadership, which is an oxymoron. If he continues to lead, and we continue to do what we should, and pursue whatever he says, we are going to at the very least, stagnate, and we may regress. This is absolutely true out there, and it is, of course, absolutely, absolutely true in here. Why is it, if any of you heard that, you should have, why is it that at the ordinary level, along about what age, 19, 20, maybe 18 nowadays, everybody you look at, if you knew how to look at it, and you should be able to do it now in retrospect, you look at them, and a simplistic dialogue took over. Simplistic power. They stagnated. That was the end of them. They do not change. They do not grow. Their state, their civilization does not change. They can paint the buildings up, that is, they can get a degree. They can sandblast some of the old structures. They can run a parade every now and then. But you see people at a class reunion after 20 years. Have they changed? They have been led, like everyone, by simplistic leadership. If you can begin to see this, it is indeed frightening. At the ordinary level, there's nothing to it. It's the way things are supposed to be, and it does give that three-dimensional aspect throughout one lifetime, more or less, of a kind of stability in other people and in life in general. That people do seem to be pretty under control, and you can count on your life more or less being predictable and stable. But part of the reason is, if you can begin to see how I'm putting this together, part of the reason is that your authority now, your leadership, is a dunderhead. It's a horse face. is inbreeding to the point that you've got a guy on the throne, or a girl on the throne, that you probably have people, you really got to go fast. You probably got people down in bars, working in shoe repair stores, not Amos. You probably got people working in the sewers that from one view are more intelligent than the king is, from one view. That's not the point. And they're not going to get on the throne. Or if they did, you'd be in worse shape. You and people out there. The point is, I want you to see, is relatively speaking, you are looking and accepting leadership from what? From probably a classifiable, inbred moron. In the clinical sense of a moron. You're being led by somebody with an IQ with the chronological age of what? 12, 14? Think about it. At your ordinary level, if it weren't for this, if it weren't for anything extraordinary, I won't say everybody else, let's start with you. Are you sure that you're not still operating, or would be operating at about the level, talking about life in general? 12, 14, 16, I can't remember what, there's clinical classifications, chronological, of morons and idiots and etc., so I could be off, but you get the point. Moron, I think, somewhere in the teens. But at any rate, think about it. Not that you didn't go to school, and you considered in high school, continued on, or maybe college, and that you learned some new stuff, some new facts, learned how to operate some new machinery at the factory after you passed the age of 14. But your relationship with the opposite sex, your relationship with your family, your relationship socially, how shy you seem to be, how aggressive you seem to be, are you any different, really, than you were when you were 14, 16? Don't think too hard. The answer is no. You're not. You got a king. Of course, you got two kings on the throne that's probably operating at the level of a moron, a clinically classifiable moron. It's frightening, not just because I say it, and it's not frightening at the city because it's supposed to be that way. But one way to look at it as being awesome, or if not frightening, is this. Is to see it, and then just realize it's true with everybody, and then realize that what I told you is true, that in a way, it's a miracle that anything gets done. The whole world, all the people, me and all the other peons out here on the street, we're all about 14 years old. Not just us, but what seems to be our guiding light, our source of authority. But it's not just us out here in the sewers and the service stations and the bricklayers. The king is. The priests are. The rabbis are. The pope is. The president is. Then it's kind of, then you may know why I use the word awesome. It makes you want to go, God. And to think every day, as far as you know, personally, at least for the last 35, 45, 50 years, and of course, if you're going to believe history, a lot longer, but you know for a fact that for 30 years, things have been going on out here, and it's nothing but a group of morons being led by other morons, and it's a miracle. We go into space, forget just getting bread and gas. We put up satellites. Guys write books on philosophy that are so entangled in Byzantine that I read them and I can't figure it out, and yet I know it was written by a moron. It was criticized by morons. It was praised by the morons. It's bought by morons. And all my thoughts about it up to this point have been moronic. And yet everything just seems to go. It's like the whole world, including me up to now, the whole world is Elmer Fudd. And everybody's just whistling and dancing along, and yet things miraculously happen. Go to other planets, fight wars, go down the oceans in submarines, and it's all a bunch of Elmer Fudds. Somebody else asked if I would say something about necessity has no restraints. And I think I'm paraphrasing that even. But it was, you recall, that which is necessary has no restraints. It has no boundaries. Now that I've said it, I'm tempted not to say anything. What can you say to that? What do you want me to say? Oh, all right. I can always say something. I can always say something worthwhile to somebody. I could say that the reason I said what can I say is this, that which is necessary, and so what are you going to say about it? But that which you think is necessary at the old level is open to further consideration. That which people think is necessary when they're being ruled by a moron is not necessarily the same thing that would be necessary if you could dispose of the moron, or at least push him in a side room and let him play court over there with the rest of them, and you could in some way put a sole, non-binary source of authority on a new throne. Then I suggest to you that which previously was considered that you thought, or that even happened beyond thought, it was just accepted as being necessary, at the very least, is open to further consideration. What is necessary? What is necessary for Elmer Fudd? What's necessary for people that talk to themselves? What's necessary for people being led by idiots and morons? Well, all sorts of things. All sorts of things. Look at what a precarious life you're living. Even to not intellectually know it, not to verbally be able to discuss it, but to realize, as people do in a crude way at the cellular level, that it is almost a miracle that life goes on like it goes on. Whatever individuals say about it, it's almost a miracle that goes on like it goes on, even if you're a bum on the street, going out looking for cans every morning, having to work 4 or 5 hours to trade them in for $2 to buy some wine. Now, from the viewpoint of most of you, I know for a fact, most of you are a little better off than that. And so you could look at that and go, my God, how can they stand that? But I guess it's kind of a shame, not only that a lot of you were never in the service and other good stuff, or never been in jail and never lived at that level. Because if you live at that level, I assure you that the bums, the people that you think that are just half wind up all day, but they consider it almost a miracle to get up, as bad as they feel, sleeping in a dumpster, but to get up every day, and even though it takes them 6 hours to make $2.10 to buy a pint of wine or whatever it is, they still consider it's almost a miracle. They don't think about it, but it's almost a miracle that they can walk down the same kind of streets today and people have thrown out cans. It's almost like the gods are doing it. It's almost a version of Jehovah and manna from heaven, except, he's not Jewish and he's not in Egypt. He's walking down the street here in the Bowery or Buckhead in Atlanta, and there are cans there. Why didn't somebody pick them up? Why didn't some other person pick them up? Why didn't the city pick them up? It's almost like a miracle. Every day there's enough cans, if I walk, that I can buy some wine. Turn the tape over. Ready? At the old level, everybody else and you takes that as being necessary, basically that which happens to them. You could call it habit, but you find it to be necessary. People do not analyze it. They find it to be necessary that they drive home from work and come up and their house is still where they left it, and that their wife is still the woman she was when they left in the morning, and they still got the same number of kids and the kids recognize them. They find everything that seems to fit into the scenario, into the nexus of you and your life. They find that necessary. If it's taken away, what you have is a science fiction, a spooky drama. If it was taken away indeed, like those shows that you did come home and you drive up and it's your house, you get out and you walk in and it's a whole new family. People you've never seen except they treat you, they know your name, they treat you. That's insanity. Of course, that is Green Acres, in a way. Those of you that never figured out why that was always one of my favorite cultural artifacts. That which is necessary at the ordinary level is that which is ordinary, that which is expected, that which is predictable to you. Anything out of the ordinary, anything that breaks up that nexus, begins to either put a strain on the whole civilization if it happens to too many people, or at the individual level, it puts, at the very least, may I say it again, a strain on the person. That is, there's normally about 1 or 2 steps maybe a short shuffle, and you're into the loony bin. They'd say the stress got him. I don't know what happened. He's been working too hard. He says that his wife is not the woman that is not who he married. He says his kids are not his kids. Stress, 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 stress. That which is ordinary helps keep you ordinary. Looked at another way, people being ordinary keeps life ordinary. Plug in predictable and repeat the whole thing instead of ordinary, and then take 2 aspirin. And do not call me in the morning. That which is necessary to ordinary people, that is to you at the ordinary level, you have got to realize by now, not for any moral reason, and not because I say it, but you've got to understand is open to some investigation. And by some investigation, I don't mean spend several years, I don't mean spend several months, I don't really mean, if you're my kind of people, to spend much over, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes. I don't mean at one time, I mean across the whole board within maybe a period of 6 months, to realize that that which you have accepted as being necessary, as I believe it was George and his great wife Ira Gershwin said, it ain't necessarily so. Don't write and tell me it wasn't his wife, and don't write and tell me it wasn't Gershwin. That what you take as being necessary is that which is necessary to keep you as you are, to keep you sane, to keep you stable and upright at the old level, which is fine. There's nothing wrong. This is not to make you nuts, as you know by now, well, at least to where anybody else can tell it. But that's not the point. It's to turn you into some raving, running down the street nude with olive branches in your hair nut. That's not revolution. That which is necessary to do this, you have to do. And life will understand. That's, if anybody needs any comfort or assurance. I can say that because I know full well how few people do it, and so I can every now and then speak up, apparently for life, like, well, life's not all that bad a guy, even though he's, got children starving and animals being mistreated and the world falling apart. I can always, every now and then, say, if you're tied up with this, you got to do what's necessary. You just got to do it. And life will understand. I can say that because I know how few people do it. And I know, way beyond just my personal level, that there's never enough doing it. Life never has occasion to take enough notice and to say, hey, stop that. Of course, life wouldn't say it, but life would make you stop it. You, though, have got to do what's necessary. And what's necessary to keep you like you are is not what's necessary to do this. Now, you should know that. One's not right and one's not wrong. But the very things that would apparently prop up, if I was going to use psychological or sociological descriptions in the ordinary sense, the very things that would kind of seem to prop up a person's personality, their lifestyle, their position in the community, all of those things, they're not evil, there's nothing wrong with it, as you know by now. Well, I'm not going to say there is. There's nothing wrong with having cars, having money, having a house, having anything. But that is not necessary to do this. And that is not necessary to keep a moron on the throne, even. It is necessary to keep the balance between the moron and the people. That is, to keep your dialogue to where you will, for 70 or 75 years, talk to yourself over and over and over, and Mutt and Jeff is living in your fucking head. And you, the dialogue that is, life is wired up to where, if somebody is suddenly asked, did you ever decide what the nature of life is? Did you ever decide whether you were actually too shy? Did you ever decide whether you should have gotten married instead of being a bachelor or an old maid all your life? Did you ever decide that you should have gone into another occupation, and they're 72 and they're dying? Well, let's say they're not. They look all right. They're going to die the next day. They don't know it. You say, have you ever figured it out? And they say, no, but I'm working on it. That close. They don't use those words, of course. But think about it into your own system. Every time you have the thoughts about, am I getting anywhere in life? Am I getting closer to my goal? Am I getting any better? Am I any closer to success? Whatever it is in your system. The feeling is, unless you are being pushed to the point of suicide, which is very simplistic and not in the mainstream of life, but ordinarily when it's brought to your attention in some way and you think about it, amidst all the noise in the court, between this moron running things and all of these lesser morons dancing backwards, the thought is, Well, yes, I am. But only a moron, only the kingdom of morons can continue with that. Because there is not one iota of proof to show that in you. None. I could suggest again as another reason why externally the Elmer Fudd's, the world, continues by and large to look upon the external as being at the very least precarious. That we are killing the planet. We are going to, before the ecology scares, we're simply going to kill each other through warfare, through hatred, through racial, through religious animosity. But there's just, in everybody, you should know this. No matter you may look like, none of you do, I'm not going to say it, that you may look and act like on the surface Elmer Fudd, not a care in the world, or Alfred E. Newman. But the mainstream of life, all but a very small percentile of people on this planet at any time, if you actually ask them, is life going uphill or downhill? Not you personally, but just life. The thing is, well, all right, if it's not going downhill, by God, it's always like on one foot. I mean, if things get just this much worse, this is optimism in the city. If things get this much worse, we're probably all done for. Or as Kyrute had one guy say, you remember, that, hey, if this is living, I'm a dead man. I was just trying to say there is that natural, even though people that do not seem to go around in the midst of a gloom all the time, all they got to do is hear that there are facts showing that the greenhouse effect is not only probable, it is now at our very best statistical projection 10 years ahead of what we thought it was last year. We were that close to destruction. Intelligent people all over this planet will go, geez, God damn, we got to do something. Are we idiots or what? Maybe we'll come look at that. I can't believe this. We ought to, let's march, let's send some money, let's go picket, let's write a letter. There is that feeling. If it said that life is about to fall apart, all over this planet, people go, ooh, God, tell me about it. But even if they don't say anything, they tremble. Why? And don't say because life is falling apart, because that just shows that, you know, you're not only Elmer Fudd, you got on an Elmer Fudd mask under that. Because, you know, there's not one iota of proof that life is falling apart. Contraire, life is growing. Life becomes more and more complex. But people would say, well, it's obvious life is coming apart. But we've been through this. Of course, every time I think about having gone through that with you, and those of you that heard it, it makes me want to say, all right, that's the end of this, and we're never going to meet again. Because if you could ever see that, that's the end of it. Of course, that's the beginning of something else. That people will say, people will agree that life is about to fall apart. Just one more push, and it's all going downhill. It's just always been on the verge. And just, if you could grab somebody, and if people actually had intelligence, as the dictionary says it is. Remember, men, what the dictionary described intelligence, which of course is that's another one about how does it take a 60-minute tape, just tell you how to make your point in 30 minutes and all those sorts of things. But that's another one, is how is it intellectual people wrote the definition of intelligence and not one person, including those who wrote it, or those that posed for the lexicographers, those that posed for it. Even they looked at the definition, and if they had any intelligence as they describe it, they'd go, wait a minute, something's wrong, because none of us, including the people that wrote it and the people that posed for this, none of us are that intelligent. So we describe something that's not yet true. But that's another story. When I started to say, I guess most of you got it that could get it, it is the internal situation that makes people throughout the planet, reasonable, sane, intelligent people by city's definition, immediately respond to if you say, never has the pressures, never has the threat, the shadow of destruction, the actual disintegration of our society, if not the planet, but at least our society, our tribe, never has it been more pressing. The whole fucking tribe, unless they got a few strange people in there, and they probably just walk off. But anyway, the rest of them will go, Jesus, that's our leader. That's why I love that king. Truer words are never spoken. Some of us won't say that, but we need that kind of leader that will stand up periodically and say, people, never has the danger been upon our state as it is now. And then the king can point Like I said years ago, the common one that's still around in other forms, but he will say, the threat of our neighboring states, our fellow man, our fellow tribes. But now it's the threat of nature. The threat of our own stupidity, our own cupidity, our own greed is going to destroy us. And the people go, geez, is that a leader or not? A guy that can stand up and say, we're all about to go down the toilet. And we think, God, we love that guy. You know, what insight? What insight? Show me one. If they were intelligent by the definition in their own fucking dictionary, show me one piece of evidence besides the most simplistic example that even Elmer Fudd could come up with. Something past that, historically. Got 5,000 years more or less to go by. Show me something that says life is disintegrating. Nobody wants to deal with that, because inside it is the feeling that the stability, what seems to be going on now, it's a miracle. It's just a miracle. It could all go like that. You have got to make new necessities. Well, you should first see that which is not moral, it's not immoral, it's not amoral. That the necessities, all the way from your reputation, your fame, possessions, if they're hobbies, fine. If they're useful, great. If you enjoy looking at them, listening to them, holding them, rubbing them. But to continue to think that they are necessities, they are the same thing as limitations, because real necessity has no limitations. But if you're dealing with non-essential necessities, then you are limited, because you've got no choice. You believe, which is not the point. You're simply wired up. You're still part of the network. That without these things, not just physical possession, but without these things, that is what people think of me and what I think of me, my own people's opinion of the king. Without that, I couldn't go on, which is true. In the city, you couldn't. Suicide. But to do this, you've got to understand it's irrelevant. It's not good, it's not evil, it's not up, it's not down. All of that is to prop up a kingdom of Elmer Fudds. It's a government of Elmer Fudds, by Elmer Fudds, run by Elmer Fudds, supported by Elmer Fudd. And when it dies, if there is an afterlife, it's going to Elmer Fudd paradise. So be it. That's it. You've had 20, 30, 40, 50 years for me to point that out and do it and go, yeah, it's not good, it's not bad. You've got to be able to turn away from that and to realize that the secret, the itch, the place I want to go is right here, but it's past that. It's not redoing Elmer Fuddville. Once a moron, always a moron. You can't make an ugly person, a stupid person, smart. Can you do it to you? Well, we're not talking about other people. Can you do it to you? Now, if you have to stop and think, get the hell out of here. You're wasting my time. You've had 40 years to find out, or 20 years. Oh, you ain't smarter. And you've got to go, there's your answer. There's your answer. There has to be a whole new field you have to cultivate. You have to see that there has to be new necessities. And the new necessities may be things that are not necessary. That is, they're certainly not necessary for you to stay alive. One is to come here 3 times a week, to come see these tapes. Is that necessary to stay alive? Not hardly. Is it necessary to believe that you're involved with something weird? Maybe not, but if you thought it was, if you've always been involved, is it necessary that you be involved with me? No, not hardly. You have to come up the necessities that a new monarch that's not Elmer Fudd, that's not a moron, has to make. Maybe necessities he requires of himself is the only way you can get absolute freedom, that the necessities, the new ones, are non-essential. Not mechanically, not back at the old level when I point out that you've got to see that that which seems to be necessary now to keep you propped up as Fred or Jane or King Elmer, that those are not necessary. That is, you don't have to think about them. You don't have to be involved with them. You don't have to argue with them. They're there. Elmer Fudd was born looking like that. He does not have to primp. He does not have to look in the mirror. Every morning he gets up. Every morning you get up and you look like you. You think like you. What else you got to do with that? You can walk away from it and it'll carry right on. If life needs, if you're in a real important position, no problem. You don't have to think about it. Why should I have to holler that? I'll ask you, have you ever had to think about doing it? Now if you have to go, get out, see. You never had to think about doing it. It just doed it. It just happened. So we're not talking about those kind of unnecessary essentials. Those just happen in the city. Now we're talking about to get away from the city up on the hill in the bushes, you cannot use what's necessary down there. You may still use them as a hobby, but that which seems to be necessary to you in the city, the ways you think about you, the ways you think about other people, they're all useless. Not right or wrong, good or bad, they're just simply useless. They won't work, they don't have anything to do with us. So then you've got to come up with new necessities. That's why I'm trying to get you to see, then it's a different level of me saying, now you may have to come up with necessities that are not actually essential. Because you can't take what you've already used, so why does that leave? You got to start demanding things of yourself that are impertinent. Boy, it's not a shock. I never told you that before, have I? Get out. If you have to, you just thought it sounded silly before. It's to make yourself do things. Work yourself up. If you're desperate, I'll use this one. Several of you like this one, I found out. Get to the point that you can do 2,000 sit-ups a day. Even if you got a stomach that looks like a dirt road that's been oiled down. Quit a hobby. Take up a hobby. All of that is the crude. All those are things I can materially describe in here. The real new necessity, oh, all right. Is refuse to ever think about and to talk to the kingdom of morons. That's the real non-essential necessity. You don't spy on them. You don't send back word to them. They're still going on. You constantly hear what's going on. You don't look down and go, ha ha. You don't do any of that. That is the new essential necessity that's not essential. You can only do it if you got a new place of authority. You can only do it if you are some kind of monarch. Because you can't discuss it. If you're going to discuss it, you're done for. There's nothing else to say. I can say something else, but there's nothing else to say, because once you discuss it, you're back there and you just think everybody else looks like Elmer Fudd. You just don't have a mirror because you're back with them. There is nothing to discuss about that.